Levi Haskett drove the post mall down by moonlight. One blow, then another. Iron rang across the flats and came back thin from the basalt hills. He was fencing Cactus, not pasture, not a spring. Cactus. 640 acres of it, silvered under a hard New Mexico moon. He moved with a lantern at his boots and a torch in his fist, burning dead grass from the alleys between the pads. Smoke hung low. Jackrabbits burst out and ran blind through the thorn shadows. From the county road, two pickup trucks idled and watched him work as if he had taken leave of his senses. His shirt was black with soot and pear juice. He cut mesquite sprouts close to the earth, dragged them aside, and laid black pipe in ruler straight lines through the spines. When the first little flames licked along the dry stems, Levi stamped them out with the heel of his boot and went on. A mockingbird fussed from a fence post. A coyote yipped once and fell silent. Then Denton Cree's truck door slammed somewhere in the dark, and a laugh carried over the land. "You fixing to graze porcupines, Haskett?" Levi did not answer. He only sighted down that strange green square of thorn and smoke, as if he could already see something the rest of Cibola County had not yet been forced to behold. "Before we go farther, lend me a little company on the trail ahead. If these backroad stories are your kind, subscribe and drop a note below with the place you're listening from. I always like knowing how far these old roads reach." Now, San Fidel was the sort of town a person could pass through in 3 slow songs on the radio. One cafe, one gas pump that still stuck in dry weather, a church bell that cracked on winter mornings. And west of it, beyond the frontage road and the red washboard lanes, sat Juniper Draw Ranch, where Levi Haskett had begun spending money he did not have on land no decent cattleman wanted. Juniper Draw had never been rich, but it had once carried itself with a little pride. Levi's father had run black baldy cows there when the monsoon still came honest. His mother kept peach jars on the sill and white curtains at the sink, even when the wind pushed dust through every seam. By the summer this story begins, those curtains were gone, the peach jars held screws and nails, and the roof over the mudroom clicked in the heat like something tired clear through. 2 lean years had eaten the hay barns hollow. One bad winter had taken most of the calves. Levi was left with his daughter, Vada, and a place that seemed forever one bill behind itself. The bill that mattered lay folded in Levi's shirt pocket until the paper softened at the corners. Southwestern Range Mutual had sent it by certified mail. Non-renewal. Wildfire exposure too high. Hazardous brush accumulation. Inspection due in 12 days. If the policy lapsed, the Red Mesa Grazing Association would strike Juniper Draw from its lease rolls before fall turnout. Levi would lose the adjoining allotment that kept his herd big enough to matter. Not a banker's note, not a courthouse foreclosure, but something meaner for a dry country man. No coverage, no permit, no season. He read the letter at the kitchen table while the swamp cooler coughed warm air and Vada pretended not to watch his face. Vada was 16, long-legged and solemn, with her mother's habit of saving the smallest useful thing. Bread sack twine, straight nails, buttons in a tobacco tin. Each dawn she strained coffee through a blue-speckled pot, then walked the trough line with a monkey wrench tucked in her waistband. She knew the sound of every gate on the place. Some whined, some thunked. One needed a hip against it and a curse under the breath. On the morning the letter came, she found Levi standing at the dish drain, staring over the yard toward the north section, where the cactus spread mile square and dull green under the sun. "You measuring trouble?" she asked. "No," he said. "I'm measuring what's left." Town gave him no peace. At Bertie's cafe, men with clean caps and dry jokes sat under the mounted antelope head and watched Levi stir too much sugar into his coffee. Denton Cree watched loudest. Denton ran better fences, newer trucks, and a smile with a sharpened edge to it. His spread bordered Juniper Draw on the south. "Here, tell your fixing to insure a cactus patch," he said, laying coins by the register. "Might as well put saddles on horned toads." Even the room's laughter sounded thirsty. Across from him sat Merritt Sloan, the regional inspector in a khaki shirt with clipped sleeves, making notes in a little book. She looked at Levi over the rim of her glass and said, "You have 12 days, Mr. Haskett. Results matter more than intentions." That evening, as crickets rasped under the porch, Vada remembered her grandmother's old saying about prickly pear. It keeps its water where no one can steal it. Levi did not talk much, but he went out to the wash pan, scrubbed his hands, and spread a county plat map across the table. The north section, exactly 640 acres, sat there in pale squares and inked lines. He marked circles at the densest stands of pear, then scored long lanes between them with a carpenter's pencil. Vada watched the pencil move. Not random, not desperate, like a man laying out rafters before a storm. When he finished, he folded the map once and said, "We start at first light." First light found Levi dragging an old section harrow behind the ranch tractor, its teeth chattering sparks where rock kissed steel. He did not plow the cactus under. He worked around it, back and forth, back and forth. He scraped bare lanes through the dead cheatgrass and broom snakeweed, leaving the prickly pear island standing green and heavy. By noon, sweat had salted white lines on his hat brim. Vada followed with loppers and a rake, clearing what the harrow missed. When a hired hand from Denton's place slowed by the fence and hollered, "Your cows learned to eat thorns yet," Levi only tipped his chin toward the water trailer. "Pass me that coupling," he said to Vada, as though ridicule were just another fly to brush away. The black pipe came next. Levi uncoiled it across the flats, staking it low through the cactus blocks and coupling it to an old nurse tank that rattled when the truck hit ruts. He watered the pears, not much, just enough that their pads swelled harder and deeper green. Vada stared at that part. "You're feeding them." Levi crouched by a valve, fingers wet and dark with mud. "I'm asking them to hold," he said. "No sermon, no grand claim, only that." In the heat shimmer, each pad seemed to lift a little more light than the dust around it. A strange crop for a rancher. Stranger still, he guarded it like alfalfa. On the third day, Denton came across the south line himself. He stepped down from his pickup in polished boots better suited to sale day than pasture work. "Levi," he called, hands on his hips. "I'll give you this much: you found the most expensive way in New Mexico to do nothing." He swept an arm at the cactus. "Insurance people want brush gone, you're out here watering stickers." Levi shut a gate with slow care. "Drive home, Denton," Denton grinned. "You know what folks are calling this?" He tapped a post with his knuckle. "Haskett's Thorn Orchard." Vada spoke before her father could. "Better than Cree's Burn Barrel." Denton's smile thinned. Then he laughed, climbed back in, and spun dust over the line. 4 days in, Merritt Sloan returned for a preliminary look. She walked the first lanes with a tape measure clipped to her belt, boots whitening with dust. Now and then she stopped, crouched, and rubbed the soil between her fingers. Levi kept a little behind her, face unreadable. At last she straightened and took off her sunglasses. "The cleared strips are clean," she said. "Cleaner than I expected." Levi waited. "But the width isn't consistent. And the brush laddering toward the rimrock on the west side is still a hazard. If a blaze drives in with wind, this won't satisfy the policy." Her pencil paused over the clipboard. "I can move the final inspection up. 9 days." Vada's jaw hardened. 9 days was not mercy. It was a starting gun. So Levi went harder. He borrowed a side delivery rake with 2 bent teeth from Cleon Pike at the feed store. He cut mesquite by hand where the tractor could not turn. He torched the dead grass in little careful bites at dawn, when the air still held some mercy and the smoke rose straight up. Vada hauled hose. Her palms blistered and toughened over. In the evenings they sat on upside-down buckets and ate cold beans from enamel bowls while the coyotes tuned up beyond the wash. Once, seeing the raw skin at the base of her thumb, Levi reached into his shirt pocket and handed her a strip of old bicycle tube. "Wrap it," he said. "Tomorrow asks the same as today." By the 6th day, the north section had begun to look deliberate. Not wild anymore, but shaped. Bare lanes crossed through the cactus in a grid broad enough for a truck to pass. Between them the pair stood stout and damp-backed, their pads fat as oven mitts, some tipped with red fruit shriveling in the sun. Even from the county road a person could see the contrast. Blonde, brittle country all around, and in that 1 square mile, a low green mass holding close to the earth. Men still laughed. Yet they slowed to look. At Birdie's, people stopped saying orchard and started saying maze. Merritt Sloane heard that, lifted one eyebrow and made no comment. Then came the discouragement. A dry storm rolled off Mount Taylor after supper, all thunder and no grace. Wind hit first, flattening the pumphouse weeds and slamming the screen door clean off one hinge. The nurse tank rocked on its trailer. Lightning stitched the west ridge, and one strike knocked the booster pump dead. By morning, half the black pipe on the north section lay wrung loose like tossed snakes. The watered pads already looked duller. Levi stood among the broken couplings with both hands hanging at his sides. For a long while he did nothing. Vada had never seen that kind of stillness in him. It frightened her more than shouting would have. He did not go to town that morning, did not shave, did not speak above a murmur. He sat at the workbench rewrapping pump wire with hands that shook from too much coffee and too little sleep. Around noon, Merritt's pickup rolled into the yard in a red plume. She climbed out carrying a new notice. Fire activity in Valencia County had tightened company orders. Final inspection would be in 4 days, not 9. Levi read the page once and folded it without expression. After she left, he walked to the barn, opened the tack room, and looked at his late wife's side saddle hanging dusty from a peg. Vada found him there. "You stopping?" she asked. "No," he said after a time. "Just remembering I've been tired before." That afternoon he sold 2 heifers early for less than they were worth and came home with pipe, fittings, and a used slip-on water tank patched with silver tape. Cleon Pike rode back with him to help set the pump. "You could disc that whole section clean and be done," Cleon said, shouldering the wrench. Levi tightened a flange until his knuckles blanched. "Then I'd have bare dirt and stumps. Bare dirt doesn't stay honest in a blow. Stumps throw sparks. Pear keeps its own wet." Cleon glanced toward the north pasture, where the cactus sat thick as a congregation. "You aiming to teach the insurance company botany?" Levi snorted once. "No, I'm aiming to show them something that survives August." They worked by truck headlights. Vada ran a flashlight beam over clamps and valves while moths battered themselves silly around the glass. Water finally surged through the new line just before midnight. You could hear it inside the pipe, a low quickening, as if the land were swallowing in the dark. At dawn, Levi was already on the tractor, widening the western lanes along the rimrock where Merritt had pointed. He cut low and close, leaving the pairs in heavy clusters. Twice he stopped to pitch aside broken beer bottles left by road hunters, muttering that some men litter more than they live. By evening, the western edge lay open and stark, and the cactus behind it looked almost military in its rows. The county did its part to mock him. Deputy Arliss Boone pulled up one morning because someone had reported an unattended burn and a deranged landowner. Arliss, a grave man with a drooping mustache and a patience shaped by bad calls, watched Levi snuff a test strip with a shovel. "You planning to set the desert on fire to save it?" he asked. Levi shook his head. "Planning to make sure it only burns where I say." Arliss squinted across the cleared lanes and green pads. "Can't say I've seen this before." "That makes 2 of us," Vada said. The deputy let out a breath that might have been a laugh. Then he signed the burn permit extension and wished them luck without sounding certain. On the 4th morning, Merritt Sloane came for the final inspection. She walked longer this time, up the west rim, down through the center lanes, across the rockiest draw where pear roots gripped the slope like fists. Levi never hurried her, never pleaded. At the truck she made 3 check marks, then one more, slow and final. "I'll recommend conditional renewal," she said. Vada let out the breath she had held for a week, but Merritt was not smiling. She looked east where the horizon had gone the color of old brass. "Recommendation isn't issuance until the office approves." She tucked the clipboard under her arm. "And this wind is wrong. If anything starts today, get clear early." Levi followed her gaze. The air already smelled faintly of struck stone. By late afternoon, the wrong wind had become a roaring one. It came out of the southeast in dirty gusts that flattened the rabbit brush and sent loose tin clanging all over Juniper Draw. Then Vada saw the first smear of smoke beyond Denton Cree's lower pasture. Not campfire gray, not cooking smoke. A black climbing column. Within minutes sirens began wailing in town, thin and urgent. Levi hauled the water trailer toward the north gate while Vada opened every latch they might need in a hurry. Over the radio, voices cracked and crossed one another. Grass fire near Cree Wash running hard, headed northwest, headed for the county road, headed for anything dry enough to take. Denton's call came while Levi was backing the trailer into place. Vada heard it tinny through the truck speaker before her father grabbed the handset. Denton did not sound like the man from Birdie's Cafe. He sounded scraped raw. "Levi," he said, coughing, "it jumped my south brake, lost the hay lot. I pushed the pears toward your line and thought they were done." A burst of static. Then wonder breaking through panic. "But it hit that cactus section and laid down. Do you hear me? It laid down there." "Where do I bring the rest?" Levi looked once across the north section, where smoke rolled low and orange flashed behind it. "East Gate," he said. "Drive them East Gate now." The first sight was not glorious. It was strange. Fire came hard through the brittle grass, shouldering itself forward with the wind, bright and greedy. Then it struck Levi's west lanes and split. Some of it ran out over bare earth and guttered thin. Some of it nosed into the prickly pear blocks, where the pads hissed, smoked, and refused to carry the flame high. Instead of leaping, the blaze dropped low and ugly, chewing at edges, losing its stride. Volunteer engines bumped in through the gate and found room to turn where Levi had cut the lanes wide. Men jumped down shouting, then stopped shouting, because the land itself was doing half the work for them. Denton came behind his cows in a stock trailer with one fender missing and soot grayed across his face. When he swung down, his hat blew off and he let it go. There was no time for pride. He and Levi ran the cows through the east gate together, slapping rumps, opening panels, turning bawling animals into the safe grid of lanes between the cactus blocks. Vada climbed a post and flagged the next trailer in. Behind it came Cleon Pike with a water truck, then Deputy Arley's. Then folks from town with shovels and wet burlap sacks. Nobody asked why Levi had fenced Cactus anymore. They were too busy using it. By sundown, the whole county road was lined with vehicles, and people stood on tailgates staring at the blackened country south of Juniper Draw. Denton's hay barn was gone. So were two of his outer fences and a strip of grassland wide as a section line. But the north mile of Levi's place sat there smoking and green-backed, scarred at the edges, holding. Merritt Sloane returned in a company truck just as the last flare-up died. She stepped out, looked over the pear lanes crowded with cattle, firemen, and neighbors, and simply removed her cap. That was all. She did not need to explain a thing. Anyone with eyes could read the answer in the shape of the ground. The next morning came washed and tender, the way mornings do after a bad fire has spent itself. Ash drifted in the puddles by the pump house. A few cactus pads were charred black on one side and shining green on the other, stubborn as mules. Cattle moved quietly through the lanes, breathing steam into the cool dawn. Denton walked up the yard path alone, boots dirty, voice smaller than Levi had ever heard it. He handed over a folded bill of sale for a load of replacement pipe and enough cash to cover it. "For the water and the gates," he said. Levi took the paper, nodded once, and poured him coffee without ceremony. Insurance approval came 3 days later, but by then it almost felt like an afterthought. The bigger thing had already happened. Men from as far as Grants drove out to study the north section. Some came to copy the lane widths. Some asked about pipe depth and burn permits. Some just stood a while, looking at the cactus with a new kind of respect, as if the old plant had changed species overnight. It had not. Only their understanding had. Vada painted fresh numbers on the gatepost and laughed when she finished, because soot still streaked her nose. Juniper Draw was not rich all at once, but it was no longer leaning over the edge with both boots on air. That fall, when the evenings turned copper and the first real chill touched the flats, Levi rode the north boundary slow and easy. Quail darted from under the pear. New pads had already budded on some of the scorched plants. Beside him, Vada said the section looked almost pretty now, though pretty was not a word people in their family spent carelessly. Levi looked across the mile-square tract that had been called foolish, useless, crazy, and worse. It always was, he said. In Cibola County, folks still slow down at that fence line, where a running fire once bent its bright head before 640 acres of green knives.